This time on Engine Masters, it is a big block Mopar cylinder head shootout of price versus power. Welcome to Engine Masters, where the big block Chrysler is the new small block Chevy or the new LS. What I mean is that we use them all the time. They're super popular around here, and I gotta tell you, if you ask the aftermarket, they are the most popular of the big block muscle car engines that are not Chevrolets. And because of that, there's a whole lot of cylinder heads on the market for them, and we're here to shoot out the price and power of the cylinder head models that are the easiest to install and that you'd be most likely to use on a typical street engine. So let's go through what those cylinder head choices are, and then I'm going to tell you all about the engine that we're going to be testing them on. First up, we've got the bone stock muscle car cylinder head, which is most commonly referred to as the 906. That's the last three digits of the casting number of that cast iron head. This is basically what you would find on any of the 383 or 440 engines throughout the muscle car era. Next up, we've got a cylinder head from a company called 440 Source. Then we've got the Edelbrock Performer RPM, and finally the Trick Flow Specialties, or TFS, 240cc CNC ported cylinder head. Now, notably missing from this whole variety is going to be an offering from Indy cylinder heads. We just didn't have our hands on those, so if those are actually better, we'll have to catch up with them next time. For now, this is what you're going to see. Okay, let's talk about the specs on each one of these cylinder heads, starting with the cast iron 906. Let's talk valve size. Originally, these were 2.08 inches on the intake and 1.74 on the exhaust. On both the 440 Source and the Edelbrock, they've got valve sizes that are a common upgrade, which would be a 2.14 on the intake and a 1.81 on the exhaust. The TFS goes another way. They've got a larger 2.19 inch intake and a smaller 1.76 inch exhaust. A little bit bigger than stock, but smaller than the other two. Then we get into chamber sizes. On the stock 906 head, Dulcich tells me that he's cc'd stock ones as big as 92 cc's. I often cut them down to 84 or 85, so that's the range that you're looking at. The 440 Source head has 80 cc. The Edelbrock head, you can buy 88 cc or what we've got here, which is 75 cc. And then on the TFS, they go with a 78 cc. Now, the inlet runner, or the intake port size as measured in cc's, is a common judge of like how big a port is and how it might apply to your engine. I gotta be honest, I don't know what that number is on the 906. As far as advertised numbers for the aftermarket stuff, the 440 Source is 212. Edelbrock is 210, and the Trick Flow is a CNC ported 240cc inlet runner. It's got a much taller valve in it, a lot of more area above the bowl, a longer radius in the thing, and so it's got a lot bigger intake runner on it. Now let me talk about the valve train hardware that we used here. We bought the base cylinder heads in every example with the cheapest spring package because we knew that we were going to upgrade them all with our own springs. We've got the very same model and part number of comp cam spring on every single aluminum cylinder head. I'm not certain what's on the 906, but the aluminums are all identical. So let's talk price on all of these. Once again, remembering that this is their lowest price for their cheapest spring package. I guess we got to start with the 906. How do you put a price on those? Well, I'll tell you that I recently took a set of my own heads that I had since way back when I was 19-year-old and had them rebuilt at a typical machine shop. And to clean them up, crack check them, valve job them, set the installed height, and sell me, I think, about 4 new valves. It was $350. So I'm gonna give that as the rough price if you had a set of 906 heads in your hand on what you would spend to actually get them dialed in. As a matter of fact, I had them milled for that as well. Next up, price-wise, is the most affordable aftermarket cylinder head here, which is the 440 source unit. These are Chinese castings. They've been used since 2007. They've kind of been proven in the aftermarket, and the reason people love them is twofold. First, they're $995. For 2 cylinder heads for a big block, that's really good. The other neat thing about them is look how the casting appears just like a stock 906, or extremely similar. The other aftermarket heads look like they've been chopped with a bologna slicer on the end, so your engine's gonna look very aftermarket. These 440 sourcers, you could paint them and they will pass for stock, so that's very cool for $995. Moving up the chain, I've got the Edelbrock Performer RPM head. Now, this price is going to be from summitracing.com, and on the cheapest package that I could get on the Performer RPM, at the time we were shooting this, they were $1,557.90. Now we're gonna go to the most expensive head of the entire shootout, which is the TFS 240 CNC ported. And that, once again, at Summit, as of the time we were shooting this, for a pair of them was $2,038. For that, though, you're gonna get that bigger valve, you're gonna get CNC porting, a CNC chamber, it's got a much taller valve and lots more area above the bowl. We'll find out if that adds up to horsepower, which is the next thing that we're gonna do. So let me tell you about the engine that we're gonna run every single one of these heads on. This is the same 440 that Steve Dulcich had in his 1971 Dodge Charger RT since he was in high school. The specs of the engine, as we're going to baseline it in the test that's actually off camera with this iron head, is going to be a Holley 850 CFM XP carburetor and the old school Holley Street Dominator intake manifold. This engine has the old Speed Pro forged 6-pack pistons in it, and the camshaft is the custom one that we had made for earlier episodes. It is a Comp Cams hydraulic roller. The specs for duration at 50 thousandths tappet lift are 236 on the intake, 241 on the exhaust. It's got 545 thousandths of an inch lift, and the lobe separation angle is 108. The last thing you need to know is that we are running it with TTI headers. It is a 2-inch tube that steps up to a 2 1/8. So that's the combination on this particular 440, but remember that the Chrysler Dodge Plymouth big block platform originated in 1958 model year cars, and they stopped using them as they trickled towards the end in RVs in 1978. They made these things in displacements of 350 and 361. You're never gonna build one of those. Or 413, or a 426 wedge, or the low deck 3D3, or 400, or of course the mighty 440. So this applies to all of those engines. No matter what you're building, you're gonna be able to take away some information on how you can make more power with it for the best bang for your buck. And the first thing that we're going to do is run the 440 source aluminum head, and then we will call up some data and compare it with the cast iron head, which we ran on an earlier day off camera. Here we go. Before we begin, I think we must acknowledge that the mullet is becoming majestic.
It was just my dream to look like Steve Dulcich, so.
Oh no, this is like if Robert Duvall was in Three Dog Night. Right? Yeah. It's not what it would be.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that. I had someone send me a photo earlier, and it looked like the lead singer of Three Dog Night with a mustache.
So this is the same 6-pack motor that we ran against the Hemi that trampled the Hemi in the torque production.
Yeah. It was better than expected, I would say.
But now we've got the single 4-barrel on it, and we're going to do the Mopar head shootout, and these are the 440 source aluminum heads, which you have called stock 906 castings made out of aluminum, right?
Well, I don't know. They look like, that was the whole idea, was to resemble the stock head.
That's the best thing about them, in my opinion.
I know, because most aftermarket heads are flat milled front and back, so it just looks like a block of cement cinder block on top of your engine block. But these, I mean, they have the stylish pattern of a stock head.
Yeah, and the core plug on the end and everything. To me, that's like the coolest thing, is that they look stock.
You might not even know if you painted them orange.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, it looks stock. I don't know how stock the ports are in design. Supposedly they're improved, and also it does have bigger valves than an OEM cylinder head. So, one more thing.
What?
Closed chambers.
Oh, for more compression than you would get with a 906 head.
And potentially quench, depending on your piston deck
design.
height.
Right.
Yeah, so performance will find out as soon as you fire up this engine.
I'm gone.
Okay, we made 519 pound-feet of torque and 481.2 horsepower, which doesn't really mean much to me. It's just kind of numbers. We want to have a look at the difference between a stock cast iron Mopar 906 casting head with a good valve job versus the 440 source aluminum head. And so here we go from a prior day. Boom.
Okay.
In red is the iron head, and in black is the 440 source head, and it's a nice gain, actually. So the 440 source aluminum head that we just ran made 519.3 pound-feet of torque at 3,600 RPM and 481.2 horsepower at 5,500. Our earlier test from a different day reveals that the 906 casting stock iron head made 513.9 pound-feet of torque at 3,700 RPM, and the horsepower was 462.5 at 5,600 RPM. So the iron head that we're looking at here at an 85cc chamber, which gave this engine 9.57 to 1 compression ratio. Same thing we tested against the Hemi earlier on. These 440 source heads are 80cc, so it's 9.99 to 1. So that's a 0.42 to 1 increase in compression that we saw by adding the 440 source aluminum heads. But I did math on that too. From our prior testing, we decided that in this compression ratio range, we're calling about a 3% gain in power for every increase in 1 point.
That's a rule of thumb.
It's a rule of thumb.
That's fair.
It's an ish.
Yeah.
So 3 times 0.42 is 1.26. Multiply that times the power that we were making with this thing, and I can attribute roughly 5.4 horsepower of this change to compression ratio rather than to the difference in the cylinder head.
I think what we're seeing down here is potentially due to some of the compression ratio change, where the flow requirements aren't quite the same. I mean, it doesn't show us head efficiency really, so it could be attributed to some of that too, but it does have a larger valve. So this is kind of a characteristic divergence of the power curve when you look at flow ability.
Airflow.
Well, and the other thing, which I'm going to repeat like my defense argument that I made at the opening of the show in front of you guys, which is, yes, these cylinder heads have different chamber sizes. And so we're not just testing airflow, we're testing the compression ratio difference. But if you've got a 440 in the car and you remove a set of stockers and install a set of these heads, that's one of the benefits that they give you, is more compression ratio. They might take your motorhome 440 from 7.4 to 1 to 7.48 to 1. You don't know, right?
Yahoo.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that's a fair comparison of red with the iron head, black with the 440 source aluminum
I think that's
head.
a significant improvement. I mean, I'm impressed.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, they're good. I like them. What's next?
The
Edelbrock
Edelbrock head and the highest compression ratio with a 75cc chamber. So let's go rip these off and install the Edelbrocks.
Okay.
Here's another change that we just made between these two heads is that the Edelbrocks are angle plugs. They're like this. The 440 source that we just took off and the stock heads both have straight plugs. They come in at an angle like that. Really, I think that's more of a consideration for header clearance than it is for performance on these things, but it is a change, so I thought I'd tell you. There you go. Boom. Missed 500 by that much.
Boy, it made more torque though. Did you see
It
that?
sure did.
Yeah.
Sure did. Looking forward to seeing the numbers. Interesting. I'm already doing math and stuff.
Calculator already, huh?
Yeah. 529.8 pound-feet of torque, and then 498.1 horsepower, which is distinctly not 500.
Oh.
Yeah.
Round it up, round it up.
It's pretty much 500. So we have to know, I would say first overlay it with the 440 source head.
Whoa.
Wow. At first I was gonna say it doesn't diverge, but it does.
It
it's
does.
tighter down
Yeah.
here than it is up there. Once
Yeah.
again, an improvement in airflow. You might not have heard me telling Steve, we raised the compression ratio again by 0.47 to 1, so another half point basically.
And I think that's where this is, but then it also, the added flow is carrying it up there. So it really laid out just
Yeah.
exactly as you had described it.
For entertainment, can you pull up our graph of what we did earlier with the 906 cast iron head?
Sure.
Wow. So you just exactly see the stepped improvement on
Yep.
how much do you want to spend, how fast do you want to go. Blue line's 906 heads, red lines are the 440 source, the black line is where we're at right now with the Edelbrock.
It really adds up.
Yeah.
Right?
And the other thing I'll say is that these with the smallest chamber of the bunch at 75 cc are an even bigger benefit to somebody who's dealing with a motorhome engine.
Yes.
Yeah. They would give, I think, an even bigger percentage of gain on something where you're jumping the compression from 7.5 to 1 to 8 to 1 than this, where you're jumping it from 9.99 to 1 to 10.46 to 1.
You know, Edelbrock just needs to make one that's 50 cc's for the motorhome engine
The
specifically.
motorhome market is just ripe for the tapping, man. I've created that market. Get on that aftermarket. Next change is going to be more interesting because this is a 210 cc inlet runner. Now we're going to put on the trick flow heads, which are a 240 with a much taller area above the bowl. All right, so let's get in there and throw the TFS heads on.
Ooh, I
Okay,
can't wait.
go ahead.
All right. Not exactly where I thought it would go, but improved.
Yeah.
2.6 horsepower short of my estimate, but not bad. We made 539 pound-feet of torque, and the horsepower was not 525 as I'd hoped, but 522.4.
No, this is good stuff. This is an excellent 440. How can you scoff anything about this engine? It's just really pretty good.
Well, because it doesn't have enough cam, and because I'm not seeing the comparison of the Edelbrock head, which is what I want to see.
Never happy.
Oh, wow.
Ah, boy.
That is a much bigger change versus airflow than what we've seen in the other ones. In other words, there's no airflow demand right here. This engine's probably happy with the Edelbrock up till we get to 4,000 RPM, and then the TFS is making a bunch more.
Yeah.
We don't normally see this until there's kind of a bigger change in cylinder head size, but look what it did here as well.
Oh.
We saw it lose just a touch at the bottom.
The black line here is the trick flow head, which is a 240 cc inlet runner, and it's much larger than the 210 that's on the Edelbrock, which is the red line. And so the larger port's actually losing a little bit of torque below 3,500 RPM, but once again, destroying the Edelbrock at every point above 4,000.
But it's supposed to. I mean, it's a much, much bigger head, probably intended for different purposes, and it's CNC ported, and it's kind of got all the stuff.
CNC chamber, bigger valves,
Yeah.
exactly. Price-wise, this head, the trick flow, would be $480 more than the Edelbrocks.
Okay.
So for $480, you're getting a big chunk of meat right there.
No, we've spent more for less.
Yes, yeah, for sure. Can you go ahead and call up all the cylinder heads here one at a time? So let's do the Edelbrock, and then we'll pull up the stock one too and just see how far we've come. Wow, there you go. It's almost like the same gain each time. It's just like how much cash are you going to shell out and how much power do you want to make? And by the way, we just went over all of that data. I should tell you that off camera, we went through that process of testing out the ignition timing again, and basically it is what it is. It's not going to give me that 525 horsepower that I wanted. It wants 36 to 38 degrees of total ignition timing, and that's it. I actually think it's awesome that there are this many options at this many price points for whatever you want to do on your big block Mopar, because I've got 440s where I would just go ahead and save the money and I would spend half what I would spend on the TFS heads by buying the 440 source heads, because I don't need all the power, they look better, and they're $995 instead of whatever these were, you know, $2,038. I guess my last takeaway is honestly also sort of aftermarket pitch man. The Edelbrock head ends up being better than I assumed it was walking in the door. I think you had a better clue about that than I did. Actually, you did too. I didn't think they would carry 600 horsepower. I think they will.
The thing I like about the Edelbrock is the packaging.
Yeah,
it's basically all stock architecture.
Done.
It's just there, boom, done. I just picked up, you know, 30 horsepower or whatever.
Yeah. So in conclusion, I guess there's no reason to ever rebuild a 906 head unless you really only want to spend $300 on your heads instead of $995, which gets you a pretty good 440 source head. And if you want to make more power than that and have more potential for the future, there's the Edelbrock. And if you're willing to step up and spend yet another $500 or $600 and spend $2,000 and get TFS heads, then you're almost unlimited as to what you can do in the future as far as a stroker kit on your 440 or whatever.
Right.
You know, Mopar guys gotta love you. You always tackle this stuff with cylinder heads and just give so much information on the big block stuff that isn't normally out there.
These days, there isn't that much information out there of people actually testing the stuff. All you can find is you never want to go more than 210 on a street 440. Wrong! We love proving guys wrong. Every single time on the show we love to do that we call Slap an eyeball across that, man. How cool is Hilborn stack fuel injection? But does it make power? Is it tunable with different stacks? Do you even care when it looks this good? Pull the kids out of the room, man, because this episode is straight up engine porn. I think we can all agree that the stack fuel injection looks amazing, but why do we feel that way? I think it's the connotation of racing, but why? Here comes the history lesson. Let's go back to the 1930s and a SoCal kid named Stuart Hilborn. He starts racing on the dry lakes of Southern California in his hot rods, and then he goes off to the Army Air Corps in World War II, and he's working on aircraft engines, and he discovers this thing, mechanical fuel injection. He comes back from the war, he simplifies it and adapts it, and makes this basic, iconic design of stack fuel injection. He throws it on his streamliner, he goes 150 miles an hour, he ends up on the cover of the 4th issue of Hot Rod magazine in 1948. Next thing you know, he's making the stuff for Indy cars, he's winning Indy like mad, drag racers start to pick it up, and all throughout the 60s and 70s, and to this day, stack fuel injection means power. And so everybody wants to emulate this look. The problem was, way back when, this was all controlled by mechanical stuff. There was a fuel pump, there was a barrel valve, and basically the throttle was on or off. I'm not saying that you can't drive it or road race it, but it was much more difficult to tune, and so people didn't do it. Then came the mid-90s and the advent of aftermarket electronic fuel injection, and that's when guys were able to put injectors into these old school stacks and start to make them more drivable. Now fast forward to now, and Holley Performance owns Hilborn as one of its companies, and their product is this, the EFI-R Big Block Stack Intake Manifold. And because Holley has it, we get to play with it. Now, to play with it, we're gonna be messing around with not just like the looks and the awesomeness, but can we tune it with different stack lengths? Now, this ends up being a little bit different than what we normally do to with carbureted intake manifolds that have a plenum in them. The plenum being like the open box where all of the intake runners run into and draw air from. Instead, with stack injection, we're really turning this big block Chevy into 8 individual one-cylinder engines, because this stack is not sharing a plenum with any of the rest of them. So it goes right down into the cylinder and right out through a header tube, and they're only connected back there at the collector. And so the tuning of runner lengths is going to end up being a little bit different than what we see on our normal plenum intake manifold, and that's because of a thing called ram tuning. So this is a level of rocket science in tuning that I can't fully understand because of the engineering behind it, but I know that we can test it, and I can explain it to you in very simple terms. It's all about pressure wave tuning. So you've got air coming down the stack, and when the intake valve pops open right during valve overlap, there's some pressure in the cylinder that makes that pressure wave, and it travels up the tube, and as soon as it escapes the top of the tube, it changes direction and works its way down. And that's what they call ram tuning, is that pressure wave helping pack the cylinder full of fuel and air. And so you can change the length of these stacks to change the way that pressure wave affects the performance of your engine. And I should give you a caveat that that whole tuning thing changes with every engine, every displacement, every camshaft, every design of the tube and cylinder head. It's wildly crazy, but we're going to be able to show you the basics of it on this particular engine with this stuff from Hilborn. So as I mentioned, you can buy this entire EFI-R manifold and everything from Hilborn through Holley, and they sell 3 different lengths of stacks. They've got the full-on long ones, which are totally awesome looking. Then they've got a medium and a short. And in addition to that, we got ourselves a short stack set that we cut in half to run them really short. And so we're going to be able to test all of those. And in addition to that, we're going to look at some old testing and find out if it makes more power than a single Dominator carburetor on a single plane intake manifold. So this is a 477 cubic inch big block Chevy. It's a big bore and a short stroke. It's got about 12.25 to 1 compression. The cylinder head is a Dart 365cc inlet runner, CNC ported, and the camshaft is in the neighborhood of 280 at 50, a big solid roller. So this is an 850 horsepower unit. It is no slouch whatsoever. We're going to roll it in there and start messing around with the different lengths of ram tubes to find out if it really does anything different to the power curve. And in the end, we're not going to care, because we're going to sit there and admire how radical this thing looks. I think you'll agree. Hey, let's find out if the Steves do before we start making noise from this thing instead of from this thing. So this thing with the carburetor, I think it made 850 horsepower, but it's going to be the whole shape of the curve that we're going to be looking at and comparing, because that's the first thing everyone wants to know. Is when I posted pictures of this, everyone's like, oh, that's got to make more power than a carburetor. And I said, why? And they're like, oh, airflow. But that's not the whole story.
The engine's only going to use as much air as the engine uses, and if an 1150 CFM carburetor does that as adequately as these do, then I don't see it being an airflow issue. I see it being one of these issues with the stack length and height.
One other aspect you can't neglect is each runner services one cylinder. So all 8 cylinders don't see all 8 of those stacks. They only see one stack.
What we've got here is 8 one-cylinder engines tied together with a crankshaft.
And with a collector out here.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I say fire it up. Let's see what our baseline is with the shortest stacks.
Let's see what we do.
Okay, it looks like we made 821.9 horsepower and 647.5 pound-feet of torque. But I want to get right into it. I want to see the test with the carburetor that we did in a prior episode. And there we go. In this setup anyway, it does not make more power than the carburetor. With the carburetor, we saw 852 horsepower. Everything above 6,900 RPM is worse with this particular stack setup. Right here, the red lines show that with the carburetor, we could only start the pull at 4,500 RPM and the EFI will go all the way down. But we keep talking about, the carburetor, but it's not the carburetor that's making the difference really, it's the manifold. So let me grab that for a second, hold on. This is the intake manifold that we ran in that prior test with a carburetor. It is an Edelbrock 2927, a big old single plane. And let's look at the difference in runner length here. I went out and measured the stack all the way to the surface where the manifold bolts to the head. It's pretty much a foot long out there. But look over here. We have one runner at about 8 inches, and then all of the inner runners, all 4 inners are 6 inches. So they're half as long. They're 7 inches versus 12 inches if you look at the average.
That's a huge difference in runner.
Huge difference.
It's the difference
right?
between a foot and half a foot.
Here's the question. Knowing that the tendency is that a long runner tends to favor lower RPM and a short runner tends to favor higher RPM, the question is, why doesn't that big long runner improve the torque curve?
Here's part of the problem I see, is this could have headed this direction. And that's what we can't see because it wouldn't carburate down there. I believe that this stack would make more torque down in the 3,500 RPM range, significantly more torque.
Okay.
We're into an area here that gets pretty technical. I've seen runners in stacks this long make more torque at 2,000 RPM. And when you get a certain stack length, it may favor, a short stack may favor 2,000 RPM as well as favor 8,000 RPM.
Okay, that addresses what I was about to ask you, which was if you believe that down here the carburetor was gonna make a whole lot less torque than the stack, then I was gonna say, so you're saying that the stack made much more power at 3,500 and then fell down way up here at 7,000? And that is what you're saying, because the resonance can happen in different places.
It will cycle through.
You'll have like first order, second order, third order, depending on how broad of an RPM range you're running.
Then my question is, which we can't answer without all of that super mega science, did it actually make less power because of less airflow or because of the runner length?
I know how to find out.
How?
We have a saw.
So we can
have
cut
stacks,
these shorter.
And we have extra stacks.
Okay. So we're gonna go cut these stacks even shorter to find out if we can have an effect on the top end power.
This seems a lot more like mechanic stuff than engineering stuff, so I'm all for it.
Yeah. All right, let's go cut some stacks. Now we're gonna find out the power of hacking. Here's where we started, here's where we ended. This tube has an effective length of 5.5 inches. This one is 2.5 inches. So will the shorter tube give us back some of that horsepower that we lost at the top end with the longer tube? If I can actually install this, we will find out. And I did. Okay. Is it just us, or can you actually hear this thing come on and off power throughout the sweep?
Yes.
I think so.
Yeah.
That's...
Well, when it becomes more efficient and less efficient, when it's struggling to accelerate, when it's making more power and less power.
Yeah. Let's look at the curve. I think it made a little bit more horsepower than the stacks before we cut them.
5, and then it's all free.
Oh, there's sort of that warble we were talking about. It's not a perfectly smooth curve. Our new power numbers with the half stacks, I guess we'll call them, are 837.2 horsepower and 638.9 pound-feet of torque. But as usual, to learn something, we've got to compare it to our before with the short stack.
Oh,
wow! The half stack is in black. The short stack is in red. Look at that.
That's what we were talking about, is it just reverses. Where there was a dip, now there'll be a hump. Where there was a dip, now there's a hump. I mean, it's just in a completely different point of VE. That's what I was saying when we started this gets really crazy. There's so many possibilities here because you've got 8 stacks, and nobody said we have to have 8 of any one length. We can start swapping lengths. We can go to header pipes, collectors, and then just change the camshaft 5 degrees on the intake,
And then
the
it all
whole
changes.
thing changes.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But I'm not sure I've ever seen an A/B test like this before.
No.
Where it swaps here and here and here, and then is just a direct improvement there.
Here's what really happens is within the packaging constraints that we typically have of a tunnel ram or a single 4-barrel intake, we have packaging constraints. So very, very likely the intake manifolds are somewhat similar in runner length. If you've got a single plane, they're gonna be pretty close. We've changed this thing 2 inches. How do you do that or change it 4 inches in a regular packaged 4-barrel intake manifold? You can't. So we'll see curves that are a little better or worse, but very similar. Here we can change it almost indefinitely.
We're making big changes.
Yeah.
Now, if we looked at the averages,
Why don't we look at the averages?
Yeah, we can.
Why don't we put the other 4 stacks that we have extra that aren't cut and see if we can put something right in the middle of here?
So you want to use half
Half of these.
half stacks, half short stacks.
Yes, and we can look at all 3 averages. We can look at one side, the other side, and the middle.
What cylinders are we going to put the uncut stacks on?
I think I'd like to go ahead and do it in somewhat of a traditional way, is put the long stack on the short inlet runner.
Okay, let's start off with the Brule way, the uncut stack on the shorter intake ports.
Yes.
Yep, here we go.
okay?
I'm actually removing the shortest stacks out of 4 cylinders, which are considered to be the short ports on a big block Chevy. And that's cylinders number 3 and 7 and 2 and 6. We're going to install the original runners that we had, or the original stacks that we had, and see if we can balance this where we can kind of split the 2 curves and have a better overall average.
I have no idea.
I'm going to withhold judgment until I see numbers.
I've checked out on the rest of the episode. I have no idea what I'm doing. This is too much science. I guess what we are trying to figure out, though, is whether the short stack, taller stack mix sort of evened out those dips and split the difference. And right now, our peak horsepower number with the mixed stacks, our torque was 636.5 at 6,400 RPM, and we saw the horsepower peak at 7,300 RPM. That was 827.8 horsepower. It does not have the peaks and valleys as much.
Well, let's see if it ends up in the middle.
Yeah, that's what we need to see.
Kind of does.
Kind of does. Black here is the half short, half longer. Red is the out-of-the-box short stack. Blue is the ones that we cut in half. So you can see that that black line almost exactly splits the difference between the peaks and valleys when we run half the stacks short and half of them long.
But the question is why wouldn't it?
Yeah, no, it should.
Yeah.
No, it did what it should do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think it's interesting to show everything that you can do with all of these links.
Yeah.
It's almost endless.
So our next step is going to be to go to what Hilborn calls the medium length stack,
Sure.
right? Which is taller than any of these.
It is taller than any of these, and you want to just do 8 straights?
Sure.
Yeah.
Why not?
Right, why not? And then we'll put the longs on, and then maybe we can do longs and shorts. And ooh, wouldn't that be weird? The shortest ones and the longest ones?
Never know. Maybe we
knows?
could have all of this and a little of that.
Maybe. All right, we're going to go to the medium stacks. I need results. Before we even look at that, I will tell you that this is why when I'm talking about stuff, I usually use the word tend. I will often say a longer runner tends to do this because we've learned there is no always. Peak numbers coming up for the mid-length stacks. We made 651.7 pound-feet of torque and 828.4 horsepower, which is at 7,500 RPM. Strangely enough, the highest RPM at peak horsepower that we've seen so far. All right, the red lines are the out-of-the-box short stacks, not the ones that we cut. The black line is the out-of-the-box mid-length, and I really expected to see a big jump up in the torque curve with the longer stacks, with the mid-lengths, and it just didn't do that. It did the DNA again.
I'm saying it's going to do this the whole way up and down.
And yet it virtually matches it above 6,300 RPM.
Frankly, my friend, the engine doesn't give a damn.
Right, that's exactly it. Yeah, so the difference is 5 1/4 inches on the short ones out of the box and about 7 1/4 on the mid-length out of the box. Yeah. And it's not doing what I would have expected if this was a plenumed intake manifold, because that's basically would be the comparison of a single 4-barrel versus a tunnel ram.
Yeah.
Kind of the difference in runner length. Our next step is going to be swapping over to the longest out-of-the-box Hilborn stacks.
There might be a reason Dick Landy ran long stacks.
I have no idea.
We're going to find out.
I've got nothing for this.
Whoa!
And the horsepower comes up from the mid-length stacks to 832.1. Crazy town. Okay.
I'm not 100% sure, but that thing that you say about tends to.
Tends to.
This long stack, I think, tends to make more low-end power.
Let's see.
No, look.
Black is the really long stack and red is the mid-length, and once again it's a DNA strand.
Well, yeah, but I guess you're right, Steve-O. If you look at the average from 35 to
45 or 5.
Yeah, it's definitely better almost throughout that whole range. Although
below 5,000, the long stack tends to make more torque.
But we don't know. Maybe the short stack swaps it around. We really have to look at all of them before we can make that call.
It's just weird.
I'm curious to see all the ones that are equal length. So the short one and then the half length. So we have 4 graphs.
So I would say pull up first the out of the box short one, like how Hilborn sells them. Okay, and now we're gonna go to the ones that we cut in half. So these will be the shortest ones that we tested. So now the shortest ones are in green, mid-length in blue, the out-of-the-box short ones in red, and the longest ones in black.
So really low-end torque goes by pipe length under 5,000 RPM, pretty much on average.
I think you're right. I really expected, looking at the initial short length, I thought cutting it in half was going to be the ticket. Well, gee, we picked up maybe 8 or something up at the very top in the last 300 RPM. That thing's really kind of poochy all the rest of the way down compared to some of the factory lengths that Holly supplied.
Yeah, way down here. You're saying when it was too short.
From 6,500 down.
It's got the lowest average power, even though it's got the highest peak.
Yeah.
Let me ask you guys this. Look how these are all pretty much the same above 6,300 RPM. Is it possible that is an airflow problem because this has the smallest throttle bores that they sell?
It's certainly possible. I mean, we're starting to tend to see some of the same crossover, a little bit up here, some changes, but I think it's potentially an airflow problem.
Staring at that power curve, the green line being our cut down really short runners, and our mid and full length, one of the longest ones, man, really, there is a quite large torque improvement with longer runners. There's almost nowhere that that they're not better in torque.
Well,
they
below
convert
5,000 RPM.
They converge there, but then look at
here. It's much worse. Here, the mid length is better, but if you're looking under 5,000,
But you know what? The longest one, it's got power here. It loses a little here, but then it's got lots of power there.
I'd be willing to bet that our combination of shorty and regular has a better average than these. Yeah, the one test we haven't been looking at on this graph is when we combined the super short ones with the out-of-the-box short ones. So our colors changed on our graph here. Now what we're looking at is the shortest stack that we cut in half is in pink. The next step up, out-of-the-box short, is in red. The mid-length is in blue. The longest is in black, and the one where we combined the two is in green. And so you can see
it's still down there.
It's pulling right down the middle, but it is still way below the long stack as far as torque goes.
Yeah, a lot.
Well, do we get to gamble once again? Anybody take a guess by looking at the graph?
Oh, yeah.
And then we can put a quarter up. And,
Which one's the best?
Yeah, I'm going to say the black one.
The black
one.
Yeah, the black one. I don't think there's a gamble there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what would be the next up runner would be the blue. It would be.
I'm thinking so, the mid-length.
So let's look at the average between long and mid-length.
Let's do that.
Because I think what we learned here is that the shorter that we got, the more power we saw way up at the peak, although that might be limited by our throttle valve size. But the shorter runners actually damaged the power everywhere below 5,000 RPM. And so overall, our tendency is to prefer the mid-length or the longest tube, and we're about to find out which one of those is better. Here's what we're looking at. Our best with the very longest tube is in black, and our worst in red. What do you think, Steve?
I think I like the long ones. They look better, too.
Oh, they look way better. Yeah, these are the coolest ones. That's really the point on the whole episode is the longest ones are definitely the coolest ones.
At least these stick through the hoods. The other one you could hide underneath.
So here's the thing out of all of this is my whole conversation about long tubes tend to do this and short tubes tend to do that.
Okay.
It's correct. We just couldn't see it through all the gobbledygook of all the bumps in the curve. But the mind blower is that because it made so much torque with the long tube, it also brought the horsepower up enough in this range that it killed the short stack on overall average power. If you were going to run a drag car, though, you still might not want to do that.
You wonder how critical that part is if you've got a 6,000 RPM converter and something that revs to 7,500. You know, it's almost a flip of a coin. Neither one seems to matter a whole bunch.
Or a boat that's only up there, or an off-road truck that's only up there, or a road race car that goes back and forth from 5 to 7.
And you know, all of this testing, it's not just what's the power. Some of this is packaging too. You know that Cobra kit car guy does not want that through his hood.
What's wrong with them?
His name isn't David Freiburger. So he's got the little short bells on it, and he probably even has some screens in there or something that knock about 30% of the flow out. But he's happy as can be because it's all the power he needs on a 2,000-pound car.
But to conclude all of our testing, what did we learn here? I know for me, I'm going to say it's that tuning of IR manifolds, individual runner manifolds, ends up being radically different than I expected versus a plenumed intake manifold.
Yeah, what was interesting to me is at the end, it kind of did what we expected. The long ones made more torque, but it did not look the way I expected at all. So that's what super threw me off. It totally looked different.
Yeah, the DNA Dyno comparison was nothing like I've seen before. How about you? Did you learn anything?
The shock wore off because I saw this a couple days ago when I was pre-testing. Because I looked at it and I went, holy cow. And I'd make little changes and it would do this crazy stuff. And then I'm back on the phone again talking to some people smarter than me saying, what is going on? How is this working? And they helped kind of walk me through it. The other thing I know is I have to buy a car with no hood so I can put those on it.
Because that is the ultimate answer, is that everybody says, who cares what power it makes? Look at it! I mean, that's awesome.
It is
and
awesome.
As you know, it is better to look good than to feel good.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And also, I think it's just more questions than answers, which is what happens virtually every time on Engine Masters.
Of course.
Just so you know, every episode has at least 15 minutes cut out, which is Steve being absolutely confounded by the mouse. It's like kryptonite to Brule.
Well, here, let's see if it rolls any better for you. Gee, I guess Superman's not quite so super.
Get that technology away from me, Freiburger.
That's right.
Not just me.
This time on Engine Masters, what is compression ratio? How much does it matter to power? And what will run on pump gas? All of that plus a pretty cool combination for a 327 Chevy. Man, I love it when a plan comes together for something expensive and complicated to answer a question that I have always wanted to test. And that question is, what is the difference between power and also pump gas sensitivity for 9.7 to 1 compression ratio versus 11.25 to 1 compression ratio? We built two complete engines to find out. So why did I pick 9.7 and 11.25 to 1? It's because I kind of think that is the range of what people would be selecting from if they're building a street engine that's got to run on pump gas. So to really get into this, let me explain what compression ratio is and why you would care. Let's start with a 4-stroke cycle. Suck, squeeze, bang, blow. Intake, compression, power, exhaust. So intake, the intake valves open, the piston drops, the pressure drop brings in air and fuel. Now into compression. Both the valves are closed, so air cannot escape. That piston moves up and squeezes that air and fuel mixture up into a nice little ball in the combustion chamber. Then, of course, the spark plug fires, you get the power stroke because the expansion of that combustion, and then of course the piston moves up and you get the exhaust stroke. Going back to compression. Now, why are we squeezing the air and fuel into a smaller space? Well, the thing is, you've got all of that fuel that's suspended in the air, and it's a bunch of molecules floating around. When we cram them all together, we take those molecules and we shove them much closer together. And what that does is it helps propagate a big spike in combustion pressure. Basically, when you cram all the molecules together, you've got one molecule handing off the fire to another molecule at a much greater rate and a much better explosion, for lack of a better word, than you do if that gas is more expanded. So when you've got a higher compression ratio, you are squeezing all that air and fuel tighter than you do with a lower compression ratio. The ratio is the volume of the entire cylinder and chamber when the piston is at bottom dead center versus the volume when it's at top dead center. So for any given bore and stroke, that's a fixed volume. And so the things that we can do to affect compression ratio are all happening above the piston when it's at top dead center. And so there's 4 ways that we can adjust compression ratio for an engine with a fixed bore and stroke. The first way is the design of the top of the piston. You can have a piston that has a dish in it or valve reliefs like this, and because that's sort of a cup, it's increasing the volume of the chamber when the piston's at top dead center. Conversely, a piston like this that has a dome on it is taking up more space in there and therefore creating a higher compression ratio because there's smaller space up at top dead center. The next way we can adjust the compression ratio is with what we call piston deck height. That is the measurement of where this piston lands in relationship to this surface, which is the deck. It's where the head gasket goes. If it's below that surface, we call that negative deck height. If it's above, it's positive deck height. Negative deck height is going to reduce the compression ratio. Positive deck height is going to increase the compression ratio. The third way we can change the compression is with the head gasket itself. How thick is that gasket? You can see a thicker gasket makes for more volume above piston top dead center. A thinner gasket makes for less volume, so the thinner gasket raises compression. The thicker one lowers compression. And the final way is to actually change the volume of the combustion chamber in the cylinder head itself. A smaller chamber, higher compression. A larger chamber, lower compression. So that's the basics. Now let's talk about the two engines that we built in order to test this whole theory. The first thing you need to understand is that they are identical, with the exception a dish in the piston over here, or technically a valve relief, and a dome in the piston over here. Everything else is the same. These are as close as we can possibly get to the same engine. What are they? They're 331 cubic inch small block Chevys. Now this is kind of weird unless you're a really old school guy like Brule. These are based on a 327 Chevy. The stroke is 3¼ inches. The bore is 4.03 inches. So there you go, 331 cubic inches. Forged crank, H-beam rods, forged SRP pistons. Now up top, we're using the new Airflow Research Hotness. This is called the Enforcer cylinder head. It is their low buck line. I can't even believe that you can buy a set of these for about $1,000. So what AFR did is they chose their favorite low buck casting. It is not the same as their street or competition 195 head, but it is 195cc inlet runner. It is not CNC ported. It is as cast. Camshaft, let's talk about what that is. We got Comp Cams to send us 2 hydraulic roller cams. They are their Thumper series. The duration is 227 at 50 on the intake and a big 241 on the exhaust. And the lobe separation angle is 107. And the carburetor is a Brawler 750 CFM double pumper. So I'm gonna tell you, this is actually a pretty good combo, and we're gonna show you that as we begin with the low compression ratio 331 for our first test on the dyno. First, let's chat about this with the Steves. You remember when, like, brontosaurs walked the earth and guys still built 331s?
Really clearly.
When was the last time you saw anything 327 based here at the shop?
I'll say more than 10 years.
Yeah, I know nobody does it anymore.
Yeah. Which is a shame, because they're kind of a cool combination. They make good power for as big as they are.
Yeah, I guess so. The only reason I built them is because I got those crankshafts cheap, but it's what I could afford.
Yeah.
So it's what we got. And now we have a couple of 331s. I think this thing's gonna run pretty good. We've already tuned it up off camera, so it's raring to go. Let's find out what it makes. This is actually pretty good.
If you told me this were a 350, I would have believed you all day long.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, these kind of power numbers, it just kind of tells me why, back when there were more, weight per cubic inch classes, why guys did these 305s and 331s and stuff. I mean, they make really good power for their size.
Yeah. Actually, let me give you the power numbers for this turd. 424 pound-feet of torque, which is what's really blowing me away, by the way, for the small displacement and low compression. And it made 440.9 horsepower, 441, which is also going to be pretty good. 441 divided by 331 made 1.33 horsepower per cubic inch. This is a pretty good little motor.
It's kind of
awesome.
It really has showed us something, I mean, about the displacement and the smaller stuff and what it can do and friction and all those things, but
don't you think BMEP is a good thing to look at here, especially compared to the compression of the other engine?
It's early in the morning and it's not corrected, so the weather's going to have some effect because that's based off of an observed number, but it is still pretty high.
Where are we?
185.
180? Wow.
A lot of times you would look at that and say, wait a minute, that's like 12-to-1 compression engine. Yeah.
That is interesting.
Part of it's morning and part of it's the engine. For a long time, Thumper cams would not have been my first pick in the Comp Cams catalog.
Yeah.
I may have just changed my thinking completely.
It's on a 107, and it's got...
That's going to help torque.
Yeah, it's going to help that mid-range torque, but it's got a lot of exhaust side. It's kind of why I didn't feel bad about it. I mean, for just off-the-shelf parts thrown together at 9.7-to-1 compression with a head that we didn't think was as good as a regular AFR 195 and isn't, it's good enough for this.
Makes me want to do more.
Yeah. Wow. I don't know what else to say about this except for that it's impressive for what it is.
Yeah, very impressive. Yeah.
All right, moving on. We're gonna go tear the top end off of this thing and roll in our 11 1/4 to 1 compression engine.
Wow, things can only get better, right?
Yeah. Two things I did not mention about the domed piston for high compression. Well, actually 3. There's stuff you need to think about when you're installing these, one of which is making sure the dome does not actually hit the cylinder head. Sometimes the chamber shape won't be compatible with the dome. The other thing is sometimes the spark plug can hit the dome, especially on a really high compression, big block Chevy with what, like a 42cc or something like that. The spark plug hits the dome on a big block.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, big time. And then the last thing is if you have a really big dome, the dome itself can get in the way of the flame propagation across the piston. And so sometimes, actually, Dulcich and I saw on a big block Chrysler once, we actually shaved the dome down. He did it with a wood router and reduced the compression and made more power. And you could see the weird flame and wear pattern on the piston. So sometimes the dome can get in the way. Slam it on there, Dulcich.
That's an electronic torque wrench.
No, I'm doing that. That's just my elbow clicking.
It's a noise I'm used to when you walk backwards.
What we did on this was we put solid roller lifters on a hydraulic roller camshaft.
All right. You got to give it a good plop.
I'm good with that.
Now we've got high compression. Everything else is identical with the exception of the timing cover, and I absolutely guarantee that does not make a difference in horsepower. All right, you guys ready? Steve, compression makes power.
It was almost like we knew what we were doing.
Well, I don't know about that. Here's our power numbers with the high compression. We made 453.9 horsepower. I'm gonna go ahead and call that 454, and 440 pound-feet of torque. I gotta see the overlay though. So now we're gonna look at low compression versus high compression. 9.7 versus 11 1/4. Interesting. I thought that it would be absolutely parallel on the whole curve. Instead, it's more down at the bottom and less up at the top. Steve, when you were tuning this up, what is the ignition timing difference between high compression and low?
We started doing that whole sweep a couple degrees at a time, and the other engine ended up at 39 degrees.
Right.
This took 41.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it doesn't surprise me.
So let's get into that a little bit. Now, typically, if we've got more efficient combustion, we tend to think that it's going to require less ignition timing, meaning maybe down to 35 instead of 41. But the other element of it is that dome in the way, and is that causing the problem?
Absolutely. In the old days, when we had the biggest dome you could fit and would hand fit them, we sometimes ended up with like 44, 45 degrees of timing for best power. I mean, it was obscene.
To be clear, what we're talking about is the reason we think that we need more ignition timing advance with the higher compression versus lower compression is that thing that I showed you in the dyno cell about the dome. It's affecting the way the flame travel goes across the piston. Basically, the spark plug ignites and it doesn't just go boom, the whole thing at once. It's still a flame traveling across that 4.03-inch bore. And the dome gets in the way and slows it down. And so you gotta run more ignition timing so that the peak pressure happens at the same point, 10 degrees or so after top dead center.
Yeah, and the big thing on the small block Chevy is the spark plug position is all the way laid out on the far end of the chamber, and it's gotta go mountain climb that dome all the way across. So.
Yep. Yeah. Okay, I'm glad we covered that. That was pretty interesting.
Yeah, good stuff.
So my second point is, you say crate engines are often 9.5, 9.7 to 1, which I agree with. And 11.25, a lot of old school people will consider that ragged edge. Now, a lot of late model cars have that, but they've got a zillion electronic controls that make it possible. Older carbureted garbage, can you drive this around at 11.25 to 1 compression?
I think you can if your engine is dialed in, your combination is dialed in where you're not overheating it, you don't have too much timing, you don't have the wrong advance curve where it's coming in too early and it's just overbearing, you know, with the tolerance. So
my opinion would be similar to that, but more application specific, which is in my 56 Chevy with a stick and a 457 rear gear, and the car weighs 3,000 pounds, I think you're never gonna have a problem. As a matter of fact, we drive that car at 11.25 to 1 with a 350 all the time. If you put this in an Impala with a 308 rear gear and a power glide, it's probably going to have a detonation problem.
And that's another aspect, and you can break that down to just call it loading.
Load.
If you put that thing in a dump truck, you're going to load that engine. It's going to be more likely to detonate. And intake air temperature is another one. There's all these factors that are going to determine whether it detonates or not.
I'm trying to decide if that's worth it. Like, would you take the risk if you were building this engine from scratch and wanted to run it on pump gas?
No.
No.
What I would do
is run it at 10 to
fall
1?
in the middle, like I always do.
10.25?
You know, yeah, 10.25, 10.4 maybe. Just
Which
kinda
would
stick it in the
probably
middle.
fall right in the middle of those two
That's
lines.
probably exactly what it would do.
What is our biggest change here? Like in here, what is the difference in torque? It is 368 versus 400.
That's huge.
That's pretty big.
Yeah.
Especially in a street car where that's where you nail the throttle. You know, at 368, you may not even bark the tires. At 400,
you might
be putting on a smoke show.
But the other thing is compression motors, as you both know, are just snappier.
Yes, absolutely.
They just react more instead of, you know? Ooh, let's look at the specific torque on this pooch. 1.33 pound-feet per cubic inch, which is
huge.
off the charts of what you and I would expect from a pump gas big block.
Take and turn that into a 565 big block and see what kind of torque that is.
Right.
That's 13.5, 14 to 1 compression area stuff, I think.
Okay, super interesting. Any
good
other
stuff.
thoughts on just the compression ratio comparo before we move on?
Well, you asked Steve if he would run that on the street, but you completely neglected the person to your right.
The answer is a given.
All right.
So the next thing I would really like to do is gasoline related. So to this point, we've been running Sunoco 100 octane fuel because we wanted to make sure there was no detonation that was going to interfere with our compression ratio calculation. So I think what we should do now is pour 91 in it. But first, I think we should jack the water temperature way up. Like, you've been running it at 130 or something?
Yeah. So I think what we need to do is raise the water temperature now and run it on 100.
Right.
Then make that comparison to the 91 because nobody's going to run around at 135 degrees or 30 degrees where we're testing. It's going to be 165 to 85.
Yeah,
so.
the detonation tolerance is way higher at the lower coolant temp.
Absolutely.
So what we're going to do is run the coolant temp up to
165 is fine.
165, 175 degrees. And we're gonna run it again just on the 100 octane fuel because we need a baseline of what that temperature change is going to do because it's gonna make less power. And then once we've established that, we're gonna put 91 octane in the tank and run it again and find out if we can see any detonation related
Whether
or
it
any power
repeats.
loss,
Yeah.
whether it repeats. Yeah. Okay, so Brule's gonna go warm this thing up and you'll see another pull. So Brule's heating it up to 175 degrees of coolant temperature, and we've got 91 octane in it. Here's our final test. The red lines here are 100 octane at a high water temperature. The black lines are 91 octane at a high water temperature. Same, doesn't care. So there's a few things to learn from that, one of which is if your engine doesn't demand higher octane fuel, then higher octane fuel doesn't make more power.
No, it does not.
And the other thing is, in dyno conditions, we're not running into a detonation problem on 91 octane at 11.25 to 1 compression.
No, not at wide open throttle for sure. What I did notice was turning the engine off.
Oh, is it diesel?
It wanted to diesel a little bit afterwards, which tells me, you know, that's that drivability thing again we were talking about.
But it's also a locked out distributor, so you've got 41 degrees of timing all the time.
That's fair. Yeah.
But in the real world, you could make this detonate on the street.
Oh, I
in
believe
a certain
that.
application. High gear
Absolutely.
ratio, driving through the desert, high load, low RPM.
High underhood temperature, heavy
Yeah.
car, high gear, absolutely.
So,
But then on the flip side of that, as a real world example, I will say that my 350 that we ran on this show in the episode about what's it like at a dyno day at West Tech, it's a 350 with 11.25 to 1,
Right.
and I drive it down the drag strip in the 56 Chevy with 91 octane, it doesn't care.
no problem at all.
Yeah. Okay, so let's review what we learned on this entire episode. First of all, I'm gonna say compression actually makes a difference. It was pretty good.
Yeah, it was.
I liked it. The other thing is timing. Don't guess. I would have guessed that the higher compression would have taken less ignition timing and it wanted more because of potentially the flame travel across that dome, right?
That makes sense.
And then we also learned that in some conditions, you can get away with 11.25 to 1, even with a fairly small camshaft with aluminum heads at wide open on a light enough car.
On pump gas.
On pump gas. That's right. Pump gas being the big thing. But the good news is I think if you are out there with a 327 Chevy and you want a really good power combo, we just gave you 2 of them.
Yeah.
You
Right.
just saw the power that you can make at either compression ratio, whether you've got a truck or a drag car that you want to throw together. It's pretty sweet little motor. So I guess what we really learned is it depends, which is kind of what we see every single time when we do Engine Masters.
In the city of Syracuse, under the sun, he solved the puzzles, every single one, with numbers spinning in his mind. A genius of the rarest kind. He yelled Eureka in the bath, found the secrets in every path, circles, levers, and the stars. Archimedes reaching far. He said, give me a place to stand, I'll move the world with just one hand. In every shape, in every flow, he found the way, he made it grow. Eureka! Let's go! He's spinning in circles, making it flow. He found the way, he made it clear. Archimedes, no one comes near. He lifts the world with just one hand. A genius born to understand. With every shape and every line, shining bright, it's Archie time. With geometry and pi in sight, he saw the world in perfect light. From volume to the golden crown, he cracked the code, he broke it down. He built machines that changed the game. His mind was bright, he earned his fame. With every thought and every plan, he's the smartest of all man. He said, give me a place to stand, I'll move the world with just one hand. In every shape, in every flow, he found the way, he made it grow. Eureka! Let's go! He's spinning in circles, making it flow. He found the way, he made it clear. Archimedes, no one comes near. He lifts the world with just one hand. A genius born to understand. With every shape and every line, he's shining bright, it's Archie time. He saw the stars, the seas, the air, found the answers everywhere. Through math and science he'd explore a mind that always wanted more. Oh, full like more energy. With every shape and every line shining bright, it's our time. He found a way, he made it clear. Archimedes, no one comes near. He lifts the world with just one hand. A genius born to understand. With every shape and every line, he's shining bright, it's Archie time. Let's go!
Nitrous oxide, the best bang for the buck in speed parts. We are going to show you how to deal with a very basic 150 horsepower carbureted system. There is no modification you can make to your naturally aspirated car that will make more power more quickly, more cheaply than nitrous oxide. This episode is going to be all about the basics of what is probably your first nitrous system. 150 horsepower gain for a typical carbureted engine. So here's what's going to happen. I'm first going to explain how nitrous oxide makes power. Then I'm going to show you the details of this plate system itself. We're going to talk about the engine we're testing it on, and then the whole episode is going to be packed with tech tips. We're going to show you some stuff about installation, we're going to talk safety, and most importantly, we're going to go through tuning and then show you big power on nitrous oxide. Let's start with why nitrous makes power. The very basic thing you need to understand initially is that the nitrous oxide is injected into the intake track of your engine along with supplemental fuel. We'll get more into that later. Step one on making power is cooling the intake charge. So nitrous oxide is stored in the bottle as a liquid, and when it comes out, it actually boils at negative 127 degrees Fahrenheit. Watch. See what I mean? So that mist coming out is really cold. It's a fog of nitrous oxide, so you are really super chilling the intake charge, and as we've shown you in past episodes, that makes power. The other thing is that nitrous oxide is a compound molecule that is 2 parts nitrogen and 1 part oxygen. The oxygen is the important part. When the nitrous is discharged into the engine and into the combustion chamber, when it sees that high spike of heat, the nitrogen and the oxygen separates. So you've got a bunch of extra oxygen in the engine. And let's review what makes fire. You must have oxygen, a fuel, and a combustion source. So now you're adding way more oxygen in there. We're also spraying way more fuel into the engine, and of course the spark plug is the ignition source. Now the big deal is not the nitrous itself, it's the fact that in that process we can burn way more fuel than we can naturally aspirated. And it's that whole bunch of more fuel that's making more power. It's also combusting much more quickly and sharply than it would in naturally aspirated trim. So that's how nitrous makes power. Let's talk about the basics of how we're going to get it into your carbureted engine. The nitrous system begins for a carbureted system with this plate right here, which is made out of aluminum and has 2 spray bars in it, and it installs underneath the carburetor. One of them takes the nitrous oxide on the blue fitting, and the other side takes the supplemental fuel from the red fitting. Now, if you look very, very closely at these spray bars, you'll see that they have holes in them. The bottom one is fuel, the top one is nitrous oxide. What's important about that spray bar design is that you've got fuel going this way and nitrous oxide coming in this way. The nitrous is going to be at roughly 950 psi. The fuel is going to be somewhere between 5 and 7 psi in a carbureted application. So you can see when that 950 psi nitrous intersects with that fuel, it's going to bring it into the manifold and make a big fog out of it. It's going to atomize that fuel better than it would in a naturally aspirated situation. So that is the basics of how the plate works. Now, how are we actually getting that nitrous into the engine? Here we go. First of all, there is the nitrous oxide solenoid. Second of all, there is the fuel enrichment solenoid. You'll see that the nitrous solenoid is larger than the fuel enrichment solenoid on this Sniper system and also on virtually every nitrous system that I've seen. The reason for that is that the nitrous solenoid needs to deal with that 950 psi. So it's got to have bigger springs, a sturdier valve, things like that. The fuel solenoid, on a carbureted application in particular, ends up being smaller. Right here on the fuel side, you see a filter. You really should run a filter both on the fuel solenoid as well as on the nitrous solenoid. Usually the NOS and Sniper kits come with a fitting right here that has a little screen in it that acts as a filter. And that's important because it's a small orifice size in these solenoids and you don't want to clog them because then you end up restricting fuel or restricting nitrous flow. So obviously, you've got nitrous oxide coming in from the bottle into the nitrous solenoid. In this case, we have a nitrous bottle pressure gauge, also critical, which we'll talk about later. Next, you've got this hose that feeds into the nitrous plate. Now, where it connects to the nitrous plate is a very critical part, which is the jet. So this is a little metered orifice, very similar to what you'll find in a carburetor, but it's designed differently. And it slides into that fitting right there. And that is what is controlling the volume of nitrous and the volume of fuel that's going into the engine. And so that part is critical. If you run without the jet, you're gonna make a lot of power. You really want the jet in there. And of course, the same holds true for the fuel side. You've got that jet and all the same situation. Of course, the nitrous is stored in the bottle, which is typically mounted in the trunk. One of the things you need to know is that inside the bottle is nitrous that is actually a liquid, and it has a siphon tube inside the bottle that runs from here down to this corner to suck it all out of the bottle. If you run this upside down, you end up not draining the whole bottle. Next, I'm gonna tell you the engine that we're gonna test this on, although in truth, with 150 shot of nitrous oxide, you can do this on almost any engine as long as it's making in the neighborhood of 300 horsepower. As a matter of fact, I've done 350 small block Chevys with 8-to-1 compression that are bone stock, maybe with a cam intake and headers, and I've scored 150 shot on 91 octane. So you can do that, but we're gonna try and be a little bit more responsible about it. The first way we're gonna do that is run this engine on Sunoco 110 octane fuel. We're trying to prevent the detonation that can be induced with the higher cylinder pressures of nitrous oxide, and that's very destructive. Now, the other thing here is we've got an all-forged bottom end. This is a 363 cubic inch engine that is based on Ford 289 or 302 architecture. It all comes from Dart machinery. The short block is what they call an SHP unit. It's got forged pistons, H-beam rods, forged crank, it's beef. Just on the top end real quick, it's got a 242 solid roller cam. It has Dart 225 CNC ported cylinder heads, an Edelbrock Super Victor intake manifold, and an 850 carburetor. That's the basics of the engine. It makes 530 horsepower. It runs to 7,000 RPM. It's awesome. The most critical thing is gonna be the rest of the episode because we're gonna show you a bunch of tech tips, a bunch of safety, and probably most importantly, all of the tuning that you're gonna need to know how to do From fuel pressure to jetting to bottle temperature, it's all in this episode. I'm gonna go sit down now with Steve Dulcich, of course, but Steve Brule is missing this episode. Don't worry, he'll be back. Sitting in for him, we've got Richard Holdner. You need to see his YouTube channel, which is called Richard Holdner, because he does all kinds of crazy dyno testing, and that means he's gonna be running the dyno for us and helping out a bunch as we baseline this thing naturally aspirated and then start to make big power on nitrous. Okay, guys, rate your love of nitrous on a scale of 1 to 10.
2.
2?
2.
Wow.
I'm saying 12.
12? 12?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
You love nitrous.
The reason I like nitrous is, one, it's the easy button.
Yep.
So it's so easy to put on, and it transforms whatever you have, makes it like the whole next level.
Yep.
Until it blows up.
That's why he's a 2, because recently we chucked 2 engines on nitrous, but we killed rod bearings. That's not our fault.
Yeah, plus the Buick we never really put together. It was a junkyard engine.
Right.
But
yeah. No, that's what we killed is junkyard motors.
Those are the
with
best
rod
ones.
bearings. Yeah, it is. I'm gonna go 8.
Okay.
Yeah.
8.
No.
And there's another aspect to the whole deal, too, for me.
What?
It runs out.
Yeah.
You have to stay on that bottle pressure and pay attention to things, whereas all I want to do is step on the gas and go.
You are a core NA guy.
Yeah.
He's all motor.
Yeah. Speaking of all motor, let's fire it up and just baseline the thing on motor just to show everybody what we're working on here. Go.
Wah!
Okay, big surprise. This thing runs exactly the same as last time we tested it.
I know, but it's just as exciting to me to hear the thing at $7,000.
I know, 7 grand is cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's have a look at the curve. Here are our power numbers at peak. The torque, 438.8, and the horsepower all the way up at 6,900 RPM at 531.5. It's interesting, the torque is so flat in here that from run to run, you kind of get to pick where the RPM peak is.
We call that a torque plateau.
Yeah, it's actually pretty good, especially for a single plane intake manifold. This time it made peak torque, it looks like at 5,900 RPM.
This is a good little motor.
Yeah, it's not bad.
That's a good little small block. I like those 363s.
Yeah, for 10.5 to 1, all good. But not good enough.
Really?
Yeah,
How do we
not
make
good
it
enough.
better?
Exactly. So we're gonna roll into the dyno cell, and I already showed you how the plate works, but we're gonna show you how to set up the fuel system and the nitrous bottle. Ready?
Okay.
Let's go. Okay, one of the first things we want to do when we're setting this thing up for nitrous is we have to adjust the fuel pressure. And one common mistake that a lot of people make is they set their fuel pressure just static. And the problem is when you hit the nitrous, you have a bunch of fuel flow and the pressure drops. So we're going to set the fuel pressure with a flow orifice to simulate what's happening when you actually hit the button. Let's check it out. Put this fancy little deal on here. We've got a flow orifice. This simulates the amount of flow that's going through the nitrous plate. So what we're gonna do is flow this into our bottle, and then we'll set our fuel pressure. See, with it flowing, we're a little over 7 PSI. Now that we set our fuel pressure, let's take a look at timing and spark plugs.
And here's another tip with nitrous, and it has to do with the spark plugs. You want to go 1 or 2 heat ranges colder than what you'd run on your NA or naturally aspirated tune-up. So we've got NKG9s in here. That's a very cold plug, so we'll be okay with this. Now, if you're running a big hit of nitrous, you might have a cutback ground strap and generally run a narrower spark gap. So Richard's got the fuel pressure and flow dialed in. You know a little bit more about the spark plugs, and David's gonna tune you up above bottle pressure.
All right, here we go, the bottle. Let's talk a little bit about bottle safety and performance. As I told you, this thing is filled with liquid right now, and it's a high pressure. Typically, you want 900 to 1,000 PSI. Here's the thing about that. If you drop the bottle and knock the valve off, it turns into a rocket. People have literally been killed by that. So it's really important with bottle safety not to drop the thing. Now, you can hook the bottle to the nitrous solenoid with either a -4 AN line or a -6, which is larger, -4 is smaller. The -4 is going to be acceptable up to about a 250 horsepower shot. Above that, you want to run the larger -6 line. Now let's talk about bottle pressure. Optimum is 900 to 950, and the way we normally test that is by temperature. We know that a full bottle at 92 or 93 degrees, as measured with an infrared gun on the outside, will give you the pressure that you need. That pressure is going to drop if the bottle is colder or if the bottle is not full. So you want a nitrous gauge to judge that. What happens if you've got too little bottle pressure is that the thing is going to run really rich because you're injecting less oxygen into the engine. So how do you know the bottle's full? There's going to be a label on it that tells you this wants to weigh 24 pounds, 2 ounces to be completely full, which it is. Now for our first test on nitrous, we're gonna run this cold. When I hook it up, we're gonna look and see if the pressure is really low, which I hope it is, so we can demonstrate how bad a cold bottle performs. So that's bottle stuff. The last thing that we're gonna do for the tune-up is retard the ignition timing. Right now, the timing's at 34 degrees. The rule tends to be to retard ignition timing 4 degrees for every 100 horsepower of nitrous oxide. Because we're running a 150 horsepower shot, we're going to retard the timing 6 degrees. Right now, it's at 34 for naturally aspirated performance, and 6 degrees minus means we're going to be running 28 degrees. So we're going to do that and then hit it with the squeeze. Okay, let's talk about why we retarded the ignition timing. Who wants to go?
Dulcich first.
Dulcich.
So it won't detonate
Okay, why would it?
because of the rate of flame propagation.
There's more fuel and more oxygen in the chamber, and so therefore cylinder pressure is higher, and all the molecules, are handing off fire to each other much more rapidly. So the thing is, ignition timing is how many degrees of crankshaft rotation before the piston is at top dead center does the spark happen. And what you don't want is a whole bunch of cylinder pressure while the piston is still moving up. And because the nitrous combusts much more quickly than a naturally aspirated combination, you have to retard the timing so that the peak cylinder pressure happens at roughly the same number of degrees after top dead center as it does NA, which is 10.
Yeah, having it happen at the right time obviously is critical for this thing to be pushing down to maximum effort and making all that power.
Yeah. Next question. We are running this thing off of a button that you are controlling.
Yes.
Instead of a window switch or a throttle switch.
I am in full control.
And so where are you going to hit the nitrous?
We can hit it wherever you want. A lot of times guys will run this thing, and some guys, as you know, the drag strip, they'll hit it like off the line on the trans brake. They'll I know you're guilty of that.
Yeah. So BMEP is highest at peak torque, right?
That's right.
So therefore, you don't want to hit the nitrous below peak torque if you can help it, because then you go through the highest cylinder pressure. Yeah. And if you're lugging the engine at too low of an RPM on the bottle, bad things happen. So 5,000 RPM?
Yeah, I'm thinking 5-ish is probably going to be fine for there.
Which is at peak torque on this thing?
The thing is, remember the curve, we have a torque plateau.
Yeah.
So we have within a couple of foot-pounds. So, anywhere in there, it's probably going to be fine. We've got enough octane in it. We're going to retard the timing. Nice and cool, negative 129 degrees. I think it's probably going to be fine.
Okay.
And it's not that big of a shot anyway.
A Richard Holdner probably is not the mark of confidence. All right, fire it up.
Okay.
Let's go. Wow.
Here we go.
What do we got?
Yeah? I don't know. You tell me.
We got some good stuff here. And boom, nitrous. Boom. So that made a difference.
It did. Here's what you want to know. 595 pound-feet of torque and 671.9 horsepower. So that's a gain of about 140.
Yep.
Yeah, which is kind of on target for the 150. What's that?
What's that?
I moved up from a 2 to a 4 now.
Oh, yeah. We got Dulcich up higher.
That's right.
You know what's freaking me out about this, though, is why didn't it kill power down here with 6 degrees less timing?
I don't know. I swear to you guys, I retarded the timing by 6 degrees. I don't know what's going on there.
We've done timing episodes where we've shown that it really matters. It matters way more than air-fuel ratio.
It makes me want to go back and double check, but I retarded the timing. You know, we went from 34 degrees down to 28 degrees to make sure that it was safe for the nitrous.
See, often what happens is if you retard the timing for nitrous, especially if you've got a big hit and you're retarding it a lot, you can make the engine actually not want to stage at the drag strip because it's such a dog, which is why they make like an MSD ignition box that will step retard the timing as soon as you hit the nitrous button. So therefore you've got normal timing down here, and when you hit the button, it pulls the timing out of it, but
I'm scratching my head.
Wow,
makes no sense. The other thing that disappoints me for our future in trying to make more power here is that often an out-of-the-box tune-up, you'll hit the button, you'll see a peak power number, and then it'll slope down. The horsepower curve will look a lot like this torque curve right here. It'll just drop. But this one is, in fact, increasing with RPM.
So you're disappointed because we nailed it right out of the box, right?
I guess. I hope that we can tune the thing and make it better.
The thing that I like about this setup is if you look at this thing, like you were saying, usually it'll go up and then the power curve will fall off. This is railroad tracking the factory curve, which is what you want, but we'd like to see us get even more next time.
Well, so now our challenge is going to be tuning even more power into this thing when it's actually going pretty well.
Yeah.
Oh, let's talk air-fuel ratio, which is going to be affected by that bottle pressure.
Let's take a look.
Wow. So the black line here is the naturally aspirated tune-up, and you can see we hit a peak of 13 to 1. It probably went down to 12.7. This one is way down here at 10.9 to 10.7 to 1, which is what we would call super rich on the nitrous oxide. And the things that can affect that are fuel pressure, nitrous jet, and pressure of the nitrous, and actually volume of the nitrous going in if it's jetted up. The next thing that we were gonna do is heat up the bottle. So this bottle pressure was about 850. The bottle temperature was 77. So we need to put it in the drink and heat it up to 92 degrees. And see what
Westech
happens.
bottle heater.
Yeah, so we're gonna walk in right now and warm the bottle from 77 degrees up to 92. Well, let me show you a problem. The nitrous line is disconnected, so there's no pressure in it whatsoever. Meanwhile, the gauge is reporting that I've got 900 pounds in it. So that thing is not working. What that means is disregard all commentary that I made about bottle pressure. It just isn't gonna be relevant. Temperature is relevant. It was 77 degrees before. Right now, Troy is gonna dunk it in our water tank, which is gonna heat it up to 92 degrees. He'll measure it with a temperature gun. Here's something about heating nitrous bottles. When you put it in a car, NOS and other companies actually sell a blanket you can put over it, strapped to it, that has electric in it, like a heated blanket, and it will heat up the bottle for you. The other thing that you see people doing that you never want to do is heating the thing up with a torch. I've seen bottles explode. Don't heat a bottle with a torch, ever. I have no idea. So let's have a look. This is going to be our comparison of the nitrous bottle at 77 degrees to the bottle at 93-ish degrees.
There we go.
All right, clearly the red lines here are going to be the higher bottle temperature. The black lines are the lower bottle temperature. So our new power numbers are 624.8 pound-feet of torque, and we made a whopping 681.9 horsepower. So this isn't really a massive difference.
I'm kind of surprised. I thought, given the change in pressure or the temperature that we did on the bottle by heating it up, putting in our the Westech bottle heater, that we would have saw more nitrous flow and kind of a bigger power gain. We saw a little bit, but not as much as I expected.
Yeah, you see it on the hit,
right?
But not so much as it carries. Yeah.
Well, what do the air-fuel ratios tell us? Is there a clue in there somewhere?
You want to
There
take a look at
probably
this?
is. Yeah, let's have a look at that. But nonetheless, you know, I've spent my life worrying about nitrous bottle temperature, like heating it up in the rental car with the heater on, and it doesn't matter as much as I thought. Now we're gonna look at the air-fuel ratio curve to see if we accomplished anything with greater bottle temperature and pressure, which would theoretically lean it out, and in reality, not really at all.
So look down here, that's essentially the same. You can see a little bit of a difference like that from run to run, just doing the same thing.
Yeah.
That's really the same.
The difference here is you hitting the button just a fraction
I
early.
missed it by 100 RPM.
Yeah, no, that's the same thing. But nonetheless, it's still 10.7 to 1. It's still really rich.
So
it's
that would
really rich.
imply that it's not really taking in much more nitrous, even at that temperature differential. You think?
We're gotta have a little bit more fluid, right?
It's got to. That's what I was thinking, is that it's making more power because it has more nitrous, but apparently not at a percentage that affects the air-fuel ratio very much.
Not as much. We gotta try to get more out of it, right?
So the question is, how do we affect the air-fuel ratio? I mean, there's fuel pressure, bottle nitrous flow, there's nitrous jet, right? So let's try fuel pressure.
Yeah, let's start with that, and then we'll work on the other things.
So we're at 7 pounds now.
That's right.
Do you want to go to 5 pounds flowing?
Let's take a swing at it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
5 PSI. Here
Let's
we go.
go.
Let's do it.
So our new power numbers are 620.7 pound-feet of torque and 688 horsepower. You can see here that the black lines are the low fuel pressure, which means leaning it out a little bit, and the red lines are what we did before. So it made a very minute change. But how about the air-fuel ratio?
Let's take a look at that.
Yeah. Okay, what is our difference, let's say point to point, like here?
We're looking about 3/10 of an air-fuel point, 3 or 4/10. The interesting thing is why is it getting lean and then rich and lean and rich? I don't understand that.
I think first we should explain to the audience that we've got a dedicated fuel system on the nitrous plate side into the fuel solenoid. So the carburetor is not being fed by the same fuel system as the fuel side of the nitrous, right?
That's right. That way we can just tune the nitrous portion of it and not the carburetor.
So this problem is not like a float bowl doing something weird or anything like that.
No.
It's strictly a nitrous situation. I don't know.
We went down to 5 PSI. Do you want to try less than that? I mean, I'd get a little scary.
No, you can't go to 3. I think your atomization goes away. Although the nitrous is intersecting the fuel. So the nitrous is busting up the fuel, but nonetheless, 3 PSI seems like it's just sort of.
So what do you think? It's a better idea maybe to go to the jet side of the
should jet
fuel
it.
rather than the fuel pressure?
That's what I'm thinking. It's interesting though, I do see guys tuning with fuel pressure at the track. However, it's typically a more advanced system like a fogger or something like that, which has more orifice area with all of the jets in the thing. I guess at a 150 horse plate system, it's not that critical. But you know what? That's what we're learning here. So let's go take 2 jet sizes out of the fuel jet for the nitrous system. So I'm saying that we want to change the jet on the nitrous system, on the fuel side of the nitrous system. It's a fool's game to be trying to tune your nitrous system with the jets in your carburetor. You don't want to do that. First of all, it won't make a significant enough change. And second of all, if you did, you're going to make the thing undrivable without the nitrous.
You already had it good, and now you're trying to tune it on the nitrous and ruining everything else outside of the nitrous.
Boom. Yeah. So don't tune your carburetor for your nitrous system. Tune your nitrous system for your nitrous system. All right, 5 PSI, 2 jets out.
Let's go tune the nitrous system.
Two safety tips about what Troy just did. He was letting the pressure out of the line with the bottle closed. First of all, the nitrous coming out of that can burn you because it's so cold, so be careful of that. The other thing is that you don't want to unthread that thing all of the way because the hose will shoot off and swing back and hit you in the tooth and take your tooth out. So Troy knows that, he's being careful. Okay, there is a nitrous system jet. You can see it's not the same as a carburetor jet at all. The other thing to be aware of is sometimes different manufacturers use different styles of jet. This right here is universal for NOS systems. So this one is going to be a 63, so we'll be changing it to a 61. Here's our number 61 fuel jet going in. By the way, the number does reflect the orifice size. And here's another tip. If you're dealing with an NOS brand system or the Sniper, the fuel side has red fittings and the nitrous side has blue fittings. So you can always keep that straight. Two jet sizes really didn't make a difference. We already looked at that, so we're gonna go another 2. All right, we're taking a big swing. I had suggested 2 more jet sizes. I asked Dulcich about 3 and he said no. We're going 6. We just decided we're gonna go all in. It feels like now we're finally starting to get somewhere. Yeah, exactly. Let's have a look. We made 695.2 horsepower, which is not 700, and we made 628.7 pound-feet of torque. So that's up. It's our best that we've seen yet, but by how much? There you go. So that's how much we gained just with fuel delivery. It's not that much. It's like, what are we messing around with this for?
It's not a ton, but it is some. So if a guy's trying to whittle away at stuff, and this is the kind of whittling you get.
Let's have a look at the air-fuel ratio to see if we even made a difference, because man, that's a big change. We dropped the fuel pressure.
I would think so.
So that's a huge change from a 63 jet to a 55. And finally, it did make a difference. It looks like 1 ratio, not quite 1 full ratio. I'll tell you what we're doing all wrong here.
What?
We're trying to lean the thing out by removing fuel.
Yeah.
How should we be leaning it out, Richard Holdner?
Adding nitrous!
Yes, that would be the better answer. From the very beginning, we should have been putting bigger nitrous jets in it instead of smaller fuel jets. My question is, can we do that at this point? How rich are we, or how lean are we?
Well, it's down below the 12s. The only time we're seeing like a little bit of a lean spike is right at the hit. You know, we're seeing it right at 13, which is, you know, we're getting in a little bit scary area on the hit.
Yeah.
The rest of it's nice.
Okay, well, we should have been tuning with the nitrous jet, and I hate myself for not doing that. I think we've gone this far. I don't want to make a jet change because I think we're going to overshoot it and make it way lean, and we're going to hurt parts.
Okay.
So instead, my thought is let's tickle 2 degrees of ignition timing into it, as in advance it 2 degrees, and see if that kicks us up over that 700 horsepower number. All right, we've looked at the data between the timing change, and honestly, it does not matter. But you know what? This engine didn't care naturally aspirated either. It was very insensitive to timing changes.
No, I saw that seemed to carry over with the nitrous too.
We've done everything about fuel tuning. We've done a little bit about ignition tuning, and at every step, we've made almost no change whatsoever, right?
So what do we say?
All we've done is make it less safe. So what I say is, if you're only gonna run 150 shot, take that thing out of the box, slap it on your engine, and have a nice day. I'm irritated by this. I really, I wanted to make changes, and it just wasn't there.
But the thing is, I am irritated too, Freiburger.
Okay.
Because I wanted 4.8 more horsepower.
It did not make 700.
What are we going to do about
Sometimes
that?
it's like that.
250 shot?
No.
Yeah.
So you're not taking a little swing. You're you're taking a big swing.
Don't care. I'm done with fooling around with this. I want to go to 26 degrees at timing, which maybe 24 degrees at timing. Does that sound
Obviously,
about right?
it doesn't seem to matter
No,
whatever
it
you
doesn't
do.
matter.
Yeah.
So let's go 24 degrees at timing, and let's hit it with a 250 shot.
Bring the timing down. Lots of jet. I'm all in.
Yeah. Parts on the floor, baby. parts
your
on
motor.
the floor. That's right. We're gonna jet this garbage. Let's go!
Yeah!
Okay, here's the dilemma. This thing made 768.2 horsepower and 698.8 pound-feet of torque. However, it's ridiculously rich. 9-to-1 is what we saw. 9-to-1. Like you said, it almost hyperlocked.
We're that close.
Way too much fuel. And you know what the right thing to do?
Add nitrous.
Exactly.
Yes.
But you know what? The plate will only go 250. It's probably a restriction.
It's maxed out probably.
It's maxed out.
Yeah.
So
So we have no other choice than to tune what we have, right?
makes me feel better. Yeah, so we're
Yeah.
going to have to take fuel out of it rather than add nitrous to it.
That's the right thing to do.
Yeah, so let's go pick whatever jet is closest to what we have, because we don't have a big jet selection, part of the problem. Okay, let's do it.
All right.
All right.
This thing doesn't care. I don't
It does
get
not
it.
care.
No.
I don't get it at all. So Richard has pulled up the air-fuel ratio curve here. This difference is simply where he hit the button, so ignore that. What we're looking for is the air-fuel ratio all the way up here at the top end, and basically it took it from like 9.1 to 1 to 10.3 to 1, about 1 ratio. But did it make a difference in power? Did it care?
It did not.
And how does it only change 1 ratio going from a 93 to a 78?
It's.
Not surprising, for sure, yeah.
I'm surprised what it did to the air fuel, and I'm surprised that we didn't see anything in power.
Little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
Little bit.
Yeah.
We made a better peak horsepower number, 778.4, the best we've seen. Now, the torque number didn't improve because he hit the button at a higher RPM. So that's not relevant right now. So with a full ratio change, that is the only difference that we saw. Red line is a little leaner and black line is stinky rich.
I can't believe how well the nitrous works, even when it has that much fuel.
Even though it's that terrible. I guess fat and happy. I can't
Yeah.
believe how a huge change makes very little difference in power or air fuel.
I was hoping we'd see more of a change as we went up in nitrous and fuel jet. I thought, okay, it's gonna be happier now that we take fuel away, it's gonna respond. The 150 maybe didn't, but the 250 should. Apparently, none of it
matters.
None of it makes
No.
a difference.
No, it's wild. And I don't think that this takeaway is going to be the same for every nitrous plate, every power level. But my takeaway for this setup
Yeah.
is take it out of the box and run it.
Yeah.
You know,
Look at that tuning window, it's just a mile
it's
wide.
a mile. I suppose that if I was doing this on a chassis dyno or something and I saw the 9-to-1, I would go ahead and make this change and run it at 10.3 to 1 just because I think it's so rich that it's not safe. And 10.3 to 1 is
Yeah.
still ridiculously rich, but let's call it safe.
The great thing is, even if a guy misses by a mile on the tune, he puts a nitrous kit on, it's gonna work pretty well.
I guess there's no risk of being too lean. The only thing you can mess up is the timing, right?
Well, yeah, you're making serious horsepower gains anyway.
Well, let's talk about the serious horsepower gains. I did the math on what a 780 horsepower gain would be off our naturally aspirated pull. It's
Yeah.
47%. It's
big
like
jump.
half
Yeah.
again more power. That thing is brutal. That is a fast program that you can drive around on the street. Nitrous is cool.
Well, you guys would know if you put that in a car, what's that gonna run?
It depends what car it is, obviously, but that's a 9-second deal.
Freiburger.
What?
I'll have to go maybe even
7?
Oh!
or 778 horsepower.
There you go.
Oh,
like
he's
that.
stepping up from his 4
No.
to a 7?
Yeah, but where are you going to get that kind of horsepower at that kind of price. I mean,
And that is the wrap up of the whole thing. First takeaway, take your low buck nitrous system out of the box, run their tune-up, have a nice day. Second one is that nitrous is the cheapest power gain that you can get. And if you run this tune-up, it's going to be safe enough if you don't mess up your timing and if you've got good gas in it. And the third thing is we're changing opinions. We're getting a 7 out of Dulcich, which we do pretty often on
Engine Masters.